Welcome to Silent Screams, where darkness, whispers, and terror await you. Are you ready to confront your fears? Story 1: The Echoes in the Walls. It began as a bargain too good to ignore, a sprawling Victorian-era mansion on the edge of a mist-shrouded forest. Sold for a fraction of its value. Ava and Mark, a young couple eager to escape the noise of city life, were entranced by the ornate carvings on the banisters, the stained glass windows that painted rainbows on the dusty floors, and the promise of space to start their family. But there was something else, an unease that crept into the air like a damp chill. The real estate agent had been reluctant to say much about the house's history, dismissing Ava's questions with a nervous laugh. Yet, the whispers started the night they moved in. On their first evening, as they unpacked boxes, Ava heard it, a faint murmuring coming from the walls. She froze, holding her breath to listen. "Mark, do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" Mark replied, setting down a box of books. But the sound faded before he could notice. Ava brushed it off as her imagination. The house was old, maybe it was just the wind squeezing through the cracks. That night, as they lay in bed, Ava awoke to a rhythmic tapping from the attic. She nudged Mark awake, but he grumbled and turned over, muttering about old pipes. Frustrated, she climbed the creaky staircase to the attic herself. The room was cold, the kind of cold that settled deep in the bones. Moonlight streamed through a circular window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. As Ava scanned the room, she caught sight of a small wooden chest tucked into a corner. She hesitated but eventually knelt to open it. Inside were yellowed photographs, brittle letters, and a child's porcelain doll with eyes that seemed too lifelike. Ava suddenly felt as if she wasn't alone. A whisper grazed her ear, "Why are you here?" The next morning, Ava showed Mark the contents of the chest. Among the letters was a journal belonging to a woman named Eleanor Green, who had lived in the house over a century ago. The entries grew increasingly frantic, detailing strange occurrences, footsteps at night, voices calling her name, and shadows that moved where no one stood. As Ava read aloud, the air in the room grew heavier. One entry in particular sent shivers down her spine. "I saw her again tonight, standing at the foot of my bed. She doesn't speak, but her eyes, oh, those eyes. She's waiting for something. I fear I may soon find out what." Mark dismissed it as the ravings of an unstable mind. But Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered in the house. Over the next week, the whispers grew louder. They came from the walls, the floorboards, even the pipes. At first, the words were unintelligible. But soon Ava began to make out phrases: "Help us. She's coming. Run." One evening, as they sat in the living room, the lights flickered, the air turned icy, and the fire in the hearth extinguished itself. Ava's breath hitched as a shadow stretched across the room, independent of any light source. Mark finally acknowledged what was happening. "We need to leave," he said, his voice trembling. But the house wouldn't let them go. Doors slammed shut on their own, trapping them inside. The whispers turned into anguished screams, filling the halls with a cacophony of despair. Ava and Mark stumbled through the house, desperately trying to find a way out. They ended up in the attic, where Ava instinctively grabbed the chest. She flung the doll across the room in frustration. It shattered against the wall, revealing a rolled-up piece of parchment hidden inside. The parchment was a map of the property, marked with an X in the backyard. Armed with flashlights and shovels, they dug into the cold earth where the map indicated. Their efforts uncovered a rusted metal box. Inside were bones, small, fragile bones wrapped in a blood-stained cloth. Ava gasped, recoiling in horror. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A guttural wail erupted from the house as a figure materialized in the shadows, a gaunt woman in a tattered dress. Her eyes hollow voids. She pointed a skeletal finger at Ava and Mark, her mouth opening in a silent scream. The whispers returned. Now a chorus of voices, "She's free. You've doomed us all." The woman lunged at them. But as she did, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. Her form dissolved into ash, carried away on the wind. Conclusion: the price of curiosity. Though the woman was gone, the house remained malevolent. Ava and Mark left that very morning, abandoning their belongings. Years later, Ava stumbled across an article about the mansion. It had been burned to the ground, but locals claimed they could still hear whispers echoing from the ruins. And in the quiet of the night, Ava sometimes swore she heard a familiar voice. "Why are you here?" Story 2: The Forgotten Corridor. Emily Harper had always been drawn to abandoned places. An urban explorer with a modest following online, she thrived on the thrill of uncovering secrets hidden in the forgotten corners of the world. Her latest find was the Holloway Asylum, a sprawling, decrepit building on the outskirts of a sleepy New England town. The asylum, operational until the 1950s, had a dark reputation. Patients disappeared, and whispers of cruel experiments haunted its legacy. One stormy evening, Emily decided to explore it alone. Rain lashed against the broken windows as her flashlight beam cut through the suffocating darkness. The main hall was strewn with crumbling furniture and medical equipment, a ghostly reminder of its grim history. She was about to call it a night when she noticed something unusual: a faded, weathered door hidden behind a stack of rusted filing cabinets. Unlike the rest of the asylum, the door was pristine, as though untouched by time. It had no handle, only a strange, spiral-shaped engraving at its center. The air around it felt colder, heavier. Driven by curiosity, Emily pressed her hand to the spiral. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into the void. The walls were lined with hundreds of small, identical wooden drawers, each labeled with a name. As she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her. The air inside the corridor smelled of damp wood and mildew. Emily's flashlight flickered as she walked, the beam glinting off brass nameplates on the drawers. She ran her fingers over them, reading the names aloud: Clara Winters, 1923, John Ackerman, 1941. Each name was paired with a date, likely the year of their death. One drawer stood out: Emily Harper, 2024. Her stomach churned. Her breath hitched as she stumbled back. "This has to be some kind of prank," she whispered, though her trembling hands betrayed her bravado. Behind her, faint whispers began to rise, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. She swung the flashlight around, but the corridor was empty. Heart pounding, Emily continued walking, hoping to find an exit. Yet no matter how far she went, the corridor stretched endlessly before her, the drawers becoming more ornate, their engravings more sinister. After what felt like hours, Emily's legs ached, and the air grew colder. The whispers grew louder. morphing into disjointed sentences. They took us. We were forgotten. You shouldn't have come here. A sudden, sharp bang echoed behind her. She spun around, the flashlight trembling in her grip. One of the drawers had slid open. Inside was an old photograph of a young girl in a hospital gown. Her eyes sunken, her face gaunt. Beneath the photograph lay a single sentence, written in spidery handwriting: "Find her, or share her fate." Before Emily could process the message, a shadow darted across the edge of her vision. It was humanoid but wrong, its limbs too long, its movements unnaturally jerky. It disappeared into the darkness. But she could feel its gaze lingering on her. Determined to understand the corridor's secrets, Emily focused on the photograph. The name on the drawer matched the girl, Margaret Ashcroft. 1937, she rummaged through the drawer, finding a small, rusted key and a note that read, "Room 302. Armed with the key, Emily retraced her steps, hoping to find any semblance of an exit. Instead, she stumbled upon a rusted staircase spiraling upward. At the top, she found a heavy, iron door marked 302. The key fit perfectly. The room beyond was a time capsule from decades past, a patient's room frozen in decay. The bed was unmade, its sheets stained and torn. A child's doll sat on the windowsill, its glass eyes staring blankly. In the corner, a girl stood facing the wall. "Margaret?" Emily called hesitantly. The girl turned, her face obscured by her matted hair. Slowly, she lifted her head, revealing hollow sockets where her eyes should have been. Emily screamed as the girl lunged forward, her skeletal hands clawing at the air. Emily bolted from the room, slamming the door behind her. The whispers in the corridor became deafening, voices pleading and screaming for release. The walls seemed to close in, the drawers rattling violently. She tripped, falling hard onto the floor. When she looked up, the shadowy figure loomed over her. Its face was a void, a swirling abyss that seemed to pull her in. It spoke without moving its mouth. "You opened the door. Now you belong to us." Emily scrambled backward, her flashlight flickering and dying. Darkness enveloped her, the whispers growing into a cacophony of anguish. Months later, a group of urban explorers ventured into Holloway Asylum. They found Emily's camera near a stack of rusted filing cabinets, its last photo showing the strange spiral door. No one ever found Emily Harper. But the corridor gained a new drawer. Its brass nameplate read, "Emily Harper, 2024. The spiral door remains, waiting for its next visitor." Story 3, Whispers from the Hollow. There is an old village, tucked away in the hills, where the wind whispers through the trees in ways that should never be heard. Hollow Grove. The place is forgotten by most, save for a few elders who still remember the days when it was alive with laughter and light. That was before the veil between the living and the dead became thin, before the whispers began. As the story goes, no one who has visited the Hollow Grove in recent years has returned the same. Some do not return at all. Those who stay away speak in hushed tones of the tragic events that drove the village into the dark recesses of history, a tragedy that still lingers in the air, a memory that clings to the very soil. And yet, there are some who seek the mysteries of Hollow Grove, to solve the enigma, to uncover the truth. Maggie sat at the corner of the cafe, nursing her coffee, the dim light flickering above her head. It was late, too late for most people. But not for her. Not when the letter had arrived. Come to Hollow Grove. The truth awaits. It had no return address. No name. Just that message. Maggie was no stranger to the strange. As a journalist for a local news outlet, she'd spent years investigating the supernatural. Her stories, though never printed in the mainstream, had gained her a small, loyal following. This letter, though, felt different. It felt personal. Her mind raced with questions as she made her decision. She had to go. The road to Hollow Grove was not on any map. Maggie had to rely on the cryptic instructions from the letter. The forest surrounding the village was dense, trees looming like silent sentinels. As she drove, the sun began to set, casting an eerie orange glow over the path. The further she went, the quieter the world seemed to become. Until even the chirping of birds ceased. It was as though the very air had been stilled in anticipation. When she finally reached the village, the first thing she noticed was the absence of sound. There were no cars, no voices, no children playing. The homes were old, some crumbling, others abandoned entirely. Yet, the faintest flicker of light from the windows suggested life, if only just. She parked her car in front of the largest building in the village. A decaying manor that had clearly seen better days. A single figure stood at the entrance, beckoning her inside. The figure was a woman. Her pale face framed by long, dark hair. Her eyes were hollow, as though they had seen things no human should ever witness. She spoke without a greeting. You came, just like they said you would. Maggie stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Who are they? What is this place? The woman's lips twisted into a faint, sad smile. This is Hollow Grove. We've been waiting for you. The door creaked open behind her, and Maggie entered, unsure of what to expect. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and dust. The dim lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. I'm afraid there's no turning back now, the woman said, leading Maggie down a narrow corridor. Once you hear the whispers, you can never unhear them. Maggie felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. The house seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The walls themselves seemed alive, their whispers barely audible, like a chorus of voices just out of reach. And then, the voice Maggie had been waiting for. A faint whisper, barely a breath against her ear. You shouldn't be here. As the hours passed, the manor seemed to change around Maggie. The shadows grew longer, the whispers louder. Every room she entered felt colder, more oppressive. Faces appeared in the corners of her vision, fading when she tried to look directly at them. She could feel the presence of something watching her, waiting. It was then that she found the journal, hidden behind a false wall in the manor's library. She unearthed the old, leather-bound book. The pages were yellowed with age. The ink faded but legible. It told the story of Hollow Grove, of a terrible curse placed upon the village centuries ago. A curse that could only be broken when the one who seeks arrived. The journal's last entry was chilling. The veil grows thin. And soon, they will come. Be prepared. As Maggie read, she felt a creeping sensation at the back of her mind, as though the walls were closing in on her. And then, she understood, the curse wasn't just a myth. It was real. The spirits of those who had died in Hollow Grove were not at rest. They were waiting for her to free them, or to join them. Maggie's mind reeled as the full weight of the situation hit her. She wasn't here by chance. She had been chosen. The whispers grew louder. More insistent. Until it felt like they were inside her head. Come to us. She turned around. And there they were, figures. Translucent but unmistakably human. Standing at the edges of the room. Their faces were twisted in agony. Their eyes wide with fear. They reached out to her. But she couldn't move. She was frozen. Trapped in their gaze. The woman who had greeted her earlier appeared once more. But now, her smile was gone. The time has come, she whispered. Now, you will see the truth. And with that, Maggie was pulled into a vision, into the past. She saw the villagers. Their lives destroyed by greed and fear. Their souls trapped in an endless loop of suffering. She saw the one who had cursed them, an ancient being. Neither fully human nor fully spirit. It had promised them immortality. But at a cost. And now, Maggie was the key to breaking it. But breaking the curse meant death. The village could not be saved. Not unless Maggie sacrificed herself to the hollow, become one with the spirits who haunted it. The room grew darker. The whispers growing louder. Maggie felt herself losing control. As though she was being pulled into the very fabric of Hollow Grove itself. The spirits surrounded her. Reaching out with cold, clammy hands. But there was one voice that broke through the chaos. You have a choice. Break the curse. Or join us. Maggie's heart raced. She knew what she had to do. She had to make the ultimate sacrifice. She had to free them. But as she stepped forward, ready to give herself to the hollow, she felt a cold hand grip her wrist. She turned to find the woman who had led her here. No, the woman whispered. You don't understand. You can never leave. You are already one of us. In that instant, Maggie realized the truth. The villagers who had died, they had never left. And neither would she. Maggie's car was found abandoned the next morning. Parked just outside the village. No one ever saw her again. But in the dead of night, if you listen closely, you can still hear her voice. The whispers from Hollow Grove. Forever echoing in the wind. Calling to anyone who dares to listen.